He's gone, Eli. He's not coming back, Marta snapped, her voice tight and brittle against the whine of the cold. The wind howled down from the crags like a warning, but Eli barely heard her. He stood with one hand still gripping the frayed leash, the other curled into a fist deep in the pocket of his coat, eyes fixed on the trail that disappeared into the snow-streaked slopes above them. Cedar had broken the leash clean off. The old dog, half shepherd, half mystery, hadn't run in months. His hind legs trembled just standing. But that morning something shifted in his eyes. He had sniffed the air, turned toward the mountains without looking back, and bolted. Bark, no hesitation, just vanished into the mist like he belonged to something older than time. Marta folded her arms tighter, her breath rising like smoke. He was dying, Eli, you know that. Dogs don't go off like that unless they're ready. But Eli didn't move. The boy had never raised his voice. Not once, not even when their mother left. Not when the power was cut. Not when Cedar first collapsed by the woodpile weeks ago. But now something churned in his throat, and when he finally spoke, it was a whisper made of iron. He was trying to tell me something. I saw it. He didn't want to die in a corner. He was leading us. Leading us where? Marta asked, her tone breaking around the edges. Her boots crunched in the snow as she took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain. There's nothing up there but frozen rock and goddamn ghosts. But Eli had already turned. The wind tugged at his coat. He stepped off the road and into the untouched snow, each footprint a quiet rebellion. By dusk, they reached the pine line. The air grew colder, thinner. No paw prints, no sign, just a silence that felt oddly watchful, like the mountain was holding its breath. They made camp that night near an old charcoal burner's hut, long abandoned and roofless. Marta didn't sleep. Eli did, but only barely. His dreams filled with a thudding heartbeat, not his own, with flashes of fur, with the scent of pine and blood. In the morning, there was a single paw print in the frost just beyond the fire's edge. One, deliberate, as if Cedar had stopped there, just long enough to be seen, and in that moment, Eli knew. The old dog was leaving them a path, not just to follow him but toward something they didn't know they needed, something waiting in the cold, somewhere beyond the ridge. He stood, brushing ash from his knees. We keep going, he said softly. He's not done yet. And the mountain, impossibly, seemed to nod. The second morning brought a sharper cold. It had crept into their boots during the night, biting the toes and stiffening the laces. The clouds above the tree line sagged low and gray, their bellies swollen with a storm yet to begin. Marta's fingers trembled as she poured a sliver of water into the tin mug they shared. She didn't say much. Eli hadn't spoken since dawn either, not really. Only the mountain had a voice now, and it spoke in creaks, snaps, and the distant thud of something shifting far above. The paw print from the night before had already begun to melt by the time the sun touched it. But its shape lingered on Cedar's. There was something unnerving about it. One print, no others, as if he'd stepped in from somewhere else entirely, left them that small breadcrumb and vanished again into the cold folds of the ridge. They packed in silence. The climb was steeper now, the terrain less forgiving. The old charcoal trail gave way to a narrow line of shale that buckled beneath their feet. At one point, Eli slipped, cutting his palm on a jagged stone. Marta hissed through her teeth and took his hand without asking, wrapping it with the cleanest piece of cloth from her pack. When he tried to pull away, she didn't let him. You think he's leading you somewhere, she muttered, tying the knot carefully. But what if he's just dying somewhere alone, Eli? What if that's the truth? He never wanted to die, Eli answered, his voice cracked and dry. He wanted to end somewhere that meant something. There's a difference. They didn't speak again for hours. The climb drained them both, each step pulling breath from their chests like debt owed to the mountain. By late afternoon, the clouds finally broke, not with snow, but with a mist so dense it seemed to erase the world around them. Trees became silhouettes. Marta's breath came shorter. Eli's nose bled briefly. High-altitude fatigue catching up. And then the trail split, one path winding left toward a ridgeline shaded by black firs, the other curling sharply up toward a narrow shelf of rock. There, just at the edge of the higher path, a scrap of something fluttered, mud-stained, torn, but unmistakably familiar. Cedar's old red bandana. Eli reached it before Marta could stop him. He fell to his knees, holding it with both hands like a relic. The fabric was stiff with frost and something darker, not blood. Sap, maybe. He didn't speak, his fingers pressed the bandana to his face, eyes closed, as if trying to hear a scent that had long faded. But Marta noticed something else. Behind the rock, half covered in bramble, was a stone marker, weathered, leaning old, a grave perhaps. No name, just stacked slate and one carved symbol. A dog's head, etched in slow, shaking lines. She felt something tighten in her chest. Eli, she said softly, I don't think we're the first ones to follow something up here. Eli stood. His eyes didn't leave the marker. Maybe that's why Cedar came. Maybe he knew. The mist thickened, curling between the trees, like breath. Marta stepped forward and placed her hand on the stone. It was bitter, cold, and dry, but something about it pulsed like memory trapped in rock. Beneath it, around the back, she found more scratches. Not human. Claw marks. Deep ones, not from aggression, but desperation. A dog trying to dig. A gust of wind tore through the clearing, and in that moment from somewhere above them, clear, sharp, and real, they heard a bark. It was short, not panicked. Just a single echo that sliced through the fog and vanished. Marta spun, her breath caught. "Tell me you heard that." Eli nodded. His face was pale now, his lips almost blue, but he was alive with something else, not fear. Something quieter, deeper belief. "He's still up there," he whispered, "and he's not alone." They chose the upper trail. Not because it was easier, it wasn't, but because they had to. The bandana and the grave were not a goodbye. They were an invitation, a signpost carved in sorrow. Whatever had brought Cedar to these mountains, it wasn't about death. Not only that, it was about memory, legacy, a return. By the time dusk bled into the mist, the path narrowed to the edge of a cliff. They nearly missed it, the narrow cave mouth tucked beneath a slab of stone, hidden by pine and snow. Marta only noticed because of the tracks, not dog prints this time, human, small, barefoot, recent. She froze. Eli followed her gaze. His hand went instinctively to his side, where the pocket knife sat, dull and half-rusted. Marta didn't speak, but her eyes were clear. This had changed. Together they crouched at the cave entrance. Inside, the dark yawned wide, and just beyond the reach of fading light, something moved, not charging, not hostile, just watching, waiting. A low whimper drifted out, not in fear but recognition. And then another sound followed it. A boy's voice. "You came," it said. Just that, nothing more. Marta's heart seized. She looked at Eli, but he was already stepping forward, as if pulled by something older than fear, stronger than understanding. That inside that cave was more than they had come to bury or mourn. Something had survived, and whatever it was, it had been waiting. The storm hit just after sundown, sudden and sharp like a slap across the face. One moment, the treetops were whispering the sky, bruised but quiet. The next, snow came slicing down in ribbons, sideways and fast, catching in Marta's lashes and stinging Eli's cheeks raw. They had barely cleared the last of the broken ridge when the temperature dropped, and visibility with it. They didn't dare. The air pressed too close, and the woods that had felt still and watchful before now felt alert by the time they found shelter beneath a collapsed tree arching like a broken rib. Both of them were shaking from more than just cold. Marta dropped her pack and knelt with her back against the roots, her face hidden in the crook of her arm. Eli crouched beside her, his eyes darting through the swirling dark. The image of Cedar's paw print burned into his memory like a trail marker. He hadn't seen another since, but something told him they weren't wandering. "Not really. I heard him," Eli murmured, his voice thin in the wind. "Last night, when you were asleep, I heard him bark, just once." Marta turned her face slightly, but said nothing. Her jaw clenched. "He was close," Eli added, softer now. "He's not lost." "No," she said after a long pause, "but we are." The silence between them filled with the groaning sound of ice shifting in the branches above. They didn't sleep that night, or maybe they did, but not fully, the kind of half-sleep where you dream with your eyes open and forget what's real. When morning came, it brought a strange quiet, no wind, no birdsong, only the soft hiss of melting frost and the creak of branches bowing under weight. They moved slowly, conserving energy, following the spine of the mountain where the snow had begun to harden into a thin crust. It was Marta who saw it first, a piece of fabric bright orange against the endless white fluttering from a twig like a flag. She rushed forward, hands trembling, and snatched it down. It was from Eli's backpack, one of the marker ribbons she'd tied to his straps back when they were kids and always getting separated in the woods. "He came this way," she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time since they'd started. Hours passed. They climbed higher than they ever had before, past the old tree line where even the hardiest spruce gave up, where stones jutted like bone from the mountain's shoulder. The wind up there wasn't wind anymore, it was a presence. Not angry, not cruel, but vast and indifferent, like the mountain itself breathing. Then, in the distance, a howl, not sharp, not panicked, long and low and old, carried on the gust like a story too far away to understand. Eli froze. Marta turned slowly, her eyes wide. "It's him," she said. No doubt. They scrambled forward, half running, slipping where the rock was loose beneath the snow. The howl came again, closer now, and this time it was joined by something else, something neither of them could place. Not an animal, not quite human. It echoed strangely, like it came from within the mountain itself. They crested the next rise and stopped dead. There, nestled in a wind-sheltered basin between two ridges, lay the remnants of something old. Stone walls, half-buried, blackened with age and soot. An old monastery, maybe, or a hermit's keep. The roof had long since collapsed, and only the spine of the structure remained, like ribs around a hollow chest. Inside that ruined circle, they saw him. Cedar stood in the center, weak-legged but upright. Snow clung to his fur. His chest rose slowly, and his breath misted like incense in the cold. But he wasn't alone. Surrounding him, just beyond the low wall, were animals silent and still. A fox crouched low, a raven perched on the blackened timber. A small herd of mountain goats stood not far off, their heads lowered in eerie stillness. It was as if the forest itself had gathered to witness something ancient and wordless. Eli stepped forward. Cedar turned his head, not startled, not fearful. His eyes met Eli's. There was no panic in them. No pain, not now, just a quiet purpose. And then, without a sound, Cedar lowered himself slowly to the earth. His body curled in against the stone, just where the light from the sky broke through the ruined roof. His breathing slowed. Marta reached Eli's side. Her hand found his without looking. "What is this place?" she whispered. Eli didn't answer, but in his chest something softened. Something cracked open because Cedar had brought them here not just to die, but to remember, to be still, to witness, to understand that not every ending is about loss. Some endings are instructions, the kind you carry home in silence. They didn't speak much after the third day. The cold did strange things to sound. It stole it, softened it, turned words into vapor. Marta's lips were cracked, her scarf stiff with frost. Eli's hands were raw and scraped, knuckles red from falling once on the rocks and catching himself on a tangle of roots. But he didn't stop. He just kept looking ahead, always scanning the snow for the smallest sign, a broken twig, a disturbed patch of earth, a single thread of black fur caught on bark. The twist came just before dusk, when Marta nearly slipped on something buried beneath the ice. At first she thought it was another rock, but when her boot hit it, it gave slightly, like it was hollow. She knelt and brushed snow away with the edge of her glove. Beneath, a rusted tin plaque. Eli leaned in beside her, and they read it together. Camp Wendover Forestry Patrol, ESD 1948. She looked up slowly. The trees around them had thickened, but in a deliberate pattern. There were low stumps everywhere, like rows. "It was a ranger's outpost," she murmured. "He's brought us to a place people forgot." Beyond the trees stood a tiny, half-collapsed cabin covered in snowdrift and lichen. Its roof sagged, and its chimney had crumbled into rubble, but the door still hung from one hinge. A dark entryway gaped open like a mouth missing its teeth. Marta hesitated, but Eli was already walking forward. He didn't knock. He just ducked his head and stepped inside. The air was colder in the cabin than it was outside. But there was something else too, something not cold at all. The air was heavy with a faint animal smell, not fresh, but not rot either. Something old, lived in. And then, there just behind the broken stove, in the shadows he saw it, a scrap of the red and black checkered blanket, Cedar's blanket, folded, somehow. Though it was torn, dirtied, and curled at the edges, it had been placed there, not dropped. Eli's knees buckled a little. He reached for it, held it close, pressing it to his face. It smelled like fur, ash, and something else. Cedar's warmth still lived in the threads. As if the dog had slept there only hours before, Marta stood silently at the door, her face unreadable, her breath hung in the cabin air like smoke. "Why here?" she whispered. Eli didn't answer. He walked slowly toward the back of the cabin, pushed open a door with his shoulder, and stepped into a room with no roof. Trees had grown in through the floorboards. The sky above was painted in dusky orange and bruised violet, and in the center of the room, circled in paw prints that had not yet faded, was a small pile of carefully placed bones. Squirrel, bird, rabbit, arranged not chaotically but like a gift. Marta stepped beside him now, slower, her breath catching as her eyes landed on the arrangement. He wasn't hiding, she said. He was preparing. Eli nodded, like he wanted to give something back. The air shifted then, not with wind, but with a presence, a stillness, not eerie, but sacred. And that's when they heard it, a soft shuffle behind them. They turned. Slowly at the edge of the trees, just past the cabin's broken wall, stood Cedar. He was thinner than ever. His ribs showed. His fur was streaked with mud and pine needles, and one paw dragged slightly as he limped. But his eyes, those deep amber eyes, were steady, clear, and fixed on Eli. The boy didn't cry. He didn't move at first. He just looked. Cedar didn't come running. He didn't bark. He simply stepped forward, once, then again. Each movement cost him, but he made them anyway. Eli stepped down from the cabin, snow crunching beneath his boots. He dropped to one knee, arms outstretched. Cedar came the final steps and collapsed gently into him, resting his head against Eli's chest like he had as a pup. Marta turned away, not to hide her tears but to give them space. They camped that night in the ranger cabin. No fire, just Cedar between them, curled weakly but peacefully. His breathing slow, not labored, just quiet. In the stillness, Marta whispered, "He wasn't running away to die. He was leading us to the place he wanted to say goodbye." Eli didn't speak. He just stroked the fur along Cedar's spine until long after the stars came out. Something had shifted. Not just in the dog, not just in the boy, but in the mountain itself. Whatever waited in the morning, it no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a beginning. The morning came slowly, slipping over the treetops with a hush that made the forest feel like it was listening. Marta was the first to stir. Her back ached from the hard floor, her fingers stiff with cold, but the silence drew her eyes open. She didn't need to look far. Cedar lay between them, exactly as he had the night before. One paw was stretched out toward the broken wall where the sun now crept in. His breath, so faint the night before, had stopped some time before dawn. She didn't wake Eli right away. There was something sacred about the way the boy had curled beside the dog, his arm draped protectively over Cedar's shoulder, as if they'd shared the same dream, as if, somewhere in the quiet hours, Eli had already said goodbye. When he did wake, he didn't cry. He just sat up, placed his hand gently on Cedar's head, and whispered something Marta couldn't hear. A farewell, maybe, a thank you, or just his own way of making peace with the silence. They buried him near the edge of the ridge, beneath a tree shaped like a crooked question mark. The ground was half frozen, stubborn, but they worked without speaking. When it was done, Eli placed the torn blanket inside with him, folding it around Cedar's flank the way he used to after long winter walks. Then, beside it, he left a single pinnacone in the old leash coiled, not like a restraint, but like a symbol, the end of a tether no longer needed. By afternoon, they were ready to go, but neither moved right away. Marta stood with her arms crossed, gaze fixed toward the sky. The wind had softened. It no longer howled or snapped at their clothes. It just brushed gently past them, like breath. He didn't come up here to die, Eli said, breaking the quiet. He came up here to let go. Marta nodded, then looked down the trail, and to make sure we didn't hold on too tight. They didn't descend the same way they came. Instead, they followed the path Cedar had carved, the one they hadn't seen before. It wasn't marked by paw prints now. It was marked by understanding. The mountain looked different on the way down. Not because the landscape had changed, but because they had what once felt like wilderness now felt like memory, each tree a witness, each gust of wind a reminder that the bond they'd followed wasn't about rescue. It was about release. Just before the last bend, Eli turned for one last look. The crooked tree stood high above, a dark shape against the blue. A place now holding something more than lost. Peace. And when the wind stirred again, it didn't chill. It carried warmth, like the whisper of fur brushing past, like the ghost of old paws, quietly walking home.